So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you this day to this webinar, where we are going to be talking about the enabling policies and regulatory frameworks for geothermal electricity and direct uses. And we're going to be taking a focus on the East Africa region. My name is Jack Kiruja, and I'm the Associate Program Officer for Geothermal Energy at the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. So I'm working with the Global Geothermal Alliance, which is a multi-stakeholder platform that brings together all geothermal stakeholders for enhanced dialogue, cooperation, and coordinated action to support geothermal development globally. So in the course of this event, we are going to discuss and share experiences on the development and implementation of enabling policies and regulations for geothermal energy. And we're also going to be hearing about the findings of a report that was developed by IRENA that was looking at the geothermal markets in the East Africa Rift region. And we hope that the discussion during this event will be of value to the stakeholders in the East Africa region. I would also like to acknowledge the contribution of our partners, the Africa Union Commission and the United Nations Environment Programme, for their support in the organization of this event. So now I would like to take this opportunity to invite the head of partnership at IRENA, Mr. Amjad Abdullah, to give us his opening remarks. Mr. Abdullah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jack. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this virtual event to discuss about the enabling policies, legal and regulatory frameworks for geothermal electricity and direct use in the East African Rift region. As you already know, a conducive environment for business to operate is a critical first step towards attracting the much needed investments in the geothermal sector. The event is organized under the umbrella of the Global Geothermal Alliance, a multi-stakeholder platform for enhancing dialogue, cooperation, and coordinated action among all geothermal stakeholders to foster geothermal development globally. I think our partners in the region, the African Union Commission, and the United Nations Environment Programme, for their support in planning and organizing this important event. The event builds on the work done by the IRENA to assess the geothermal markets in 13 countries of the East African Rift. The report titled Geothermal Development in East Africa, published in November 2020. It provides an updated status of geothermal development in the region as of 2020, identifies the main challenges hindering the development, and provides recommendations for policymakers on the necessary actions to accelerate the development of geothermal energy for both electricity and direct users. The recognition of the need for assessment of regional geothermal development in the East African Rift countries was one of the outcomes of the regional workshop on geothermal financing and risk mitigation in East Africa in 2018. I also want to thank the government of Japan for their support and contribution in the development of this important publication. My colleagues will share with you the key findings of the publications shortly. I also want to commend the region for the tremendous strides it has taken to develop its vast geothermal resources. I note that Kenya has an installed capacity of about 900 megawatt of electricity, which supplies close to a half of its power generation, making it 7th largest geothermal producing country in the entire world. In Ethiopia, the ongoing drilling activities in Tulumaya and Aluto Langono will certainly provide a steam required to increase the geothermal capacity beyond the 8 megawatt that the country installed in recent times. The fixed exploration activities act at an advantage, at advanced stage, as it is an advanced stage being undertaken in Djibouti, Uganda, Tanzania, Comoros, and Zambia, among other countries in the region. And the drilling of gradient well and slim holes are a positive indication of the commitment by the region to develop its geothermal resources to meet its energy needs for today and the coming days in future. Innovation has been a key success factor for geothermal development in East Africa. The adoption of well-headed technology has enabled early generation of electricity from geothermal wells. The development of new institutional setup and business models has allowed some countries in the region to build capacity and attract financing for resource development. The increasing focus on direct uses in the region is a welcome development. During the AGIO 7 conference in Kigali, Rwanda in 2018, the delegates urged the East African governments to mainstream direct use of geothermal energy for the economic development of their citizens. The multiple applications of the geothermal energy, mainly in the agri-food and industrial sectors, makes it a preferred renewable resources for the region to provide the much needed support for direct use applications. IRENA is spearheading the development of guidelines for policymakers to enable the uptake of geothermal energy in the agri-food sector. Despite all these efforts, the development of geothermal energy still faces numerous challenges globally. And in the East African region is not an exception. Inadequate policies and regulations in most countries, limited financing options, and lack of adequate technical and institutional capacity to implement geothermal projects have been identified as some of the key challenges and barriers. I also wanted to applaud the efforts by various organizations that have provided support to the region to address these challenges. Indeed, more could be done and achieved through enhanced cooperation among geothermal stakeholders, both nationally and regionally and internationally. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to reiterate the importance of developing clear policies to spell out the role of geothermal in the energy mix. Only then will we begin to see a keen interest by investors and developers. It is also critical to provide clear and simple licensing procedures to build a confidence of investors. It is because of this, IRENA considered it necessary to organize this important event as a platform for engaging and for exchanging experiences and best practices among the countries in the region. During this event, we will also hear from Mexico about their experiences in developing geothermal policies and regulations. The outcome of this event will no doubt be particularly beneficial to the countries in the region who are in the process of developing dedicated geothermal policies and regulatory frameworks. I do encourage them to expedite this process so that we can benefit from increased geothermal investments as the energy transition agenda gains momentum both globally and regionally for both energy transition and climate actions. I thank you and I look forward for a very fruitful discussions. Thank you. Over to you, Jack.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdullah, for those insightful remarks. Now, on behalf of the Acting Director for Infrastructure and Energy for African Union Commission, I would like to welcome Mr. Joseph Mwangi, who is the Policy Officer for Renewable Energy and Infrastructure and Energy at the African Union Commission, to give his opening remarks. Mr. Mwangi, The floor
Okay,
is yours.
thank you very much, Jack. Mr. Amjad Abdallah, Head of Partnerships at IRENA, Dr. Meseret, Energy Program Manager, Regional Office of Africa at UNEP, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Acting Director of Africa of Infrastructure and Energy at the African Union, I greet you all and welcome you to this important webinar on enabling policies and regulatory framework for geothermal power and direct use in East African lift. I would like to first congratulate and commend the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, for its continuing efforts in promoting and assisting African countries to develop renewable energy resources. Various IRENA programs, for instance, Africa Clean Energy Corridor, Renewable Readiness Assessment, and IRENA Abu Dhabi Fund, among others, have greatly boosted our efforts to provide modern, reliable, and affordable energy as stipulated in SDG 2030 and the African Union Agenda 2060. The current low levels of energy infrastructure and access to modern energy services on the continent means that Africa will have to utilize all forms of its abundant energy resources using various technologies for both on-grid and off-grid applications to meet its growing needs for energy services. There is no doubt that geothermal energy has a huge role to play in the future African energy systems, especially the fact that geothermal offers baseload, and it will enable us to integrate large volume of intermittent renewables, that's wind and solar. The barriers hindering geothermal development in the continent have mainly been technical, financial, and policy regulatory obstacles. Through international cooperation, such as this arrangement with IRENA and UNEP, we are able to discuss some of these challenges and provide key recommendations, especially in regards to policy and regulatory framework. Distinguished participants, recognizing the important role that geothermal can play in our energy systems and its contribution to bridging energy gap in the continent, the African Union Commission established Geothermal Risk Mitigation Facility to fund, facilitate, and accelerate geothermal development in member states along the Eastern African lift region. The objective of the facility is to encourage public and private investors, as well as public-private partnerships to develop geothermal projects for power generation in Eastern Africa through supporting early-stage development by providing grants for two types of activities. That is the surface studies to determine the optimal location of exploration wells, as well as drilling exploration wells and testing of reservoirs. In regards to the financing support, the GLMF offers the following. That is up to 80% of eligible cost for surface study, excluding the infrastructure cost, up to 40% of cost of exploration clearing and testing program for reservoir confirmation works, excluding the infrastructure cost as well, and up to 20% of the cost for infrastructure required for surface study and drilling programs. That is the cost for access roads, water supply, among others. And the continuation premium of up to 30% of the approved cost of continuation activities, or up to 30% of the developer's share of the eligible cost incurred during the initial drilling, whatever is lower. The grant is awarded through competitive application rounds based on quality of the proposed project, based on the quality of the proposed project's geological, technical data and work program, financial viability, environmental, as well as social sustainability. Since its launch in 2012, we have carried out 6 application rounds and awarded about 35 projects with total grant volume of approximately $130 million. As the GLMF interest in the region is still very high among the developers, we launched the 7th application round on 22nd June 2021 and will continue receiving expression of interest until 31st of August 2021. Projects that were not successful in previous application rounds, as well as new projects, are welcome to apply. You may please log into the GLMF website, that is glmfeastafrica.org, for details on application procedure. Ladies and gentlemen, since this webinar will also discuss Geothermal direct-to-use applications, I wish to inform you that the African Union has started engaging our donor partners for possible inclusion of direct use in future GLMF application lines. As soon as this is agreed with the donors, we will update all relevant stakeholders accordingly. In conclusion, I thank you all and we wish all of us a great and productive discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mwangi, for those remarks. Now I would want to welcome Dr. Meseret Teklemariam, who is the program manager for ARGEO at United Nations Environment Program, to give us her opening remarks. Dr. Meseret, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jack, for the introduction. Mr. Amjad Abdullah, Head of Partnership, International Renewable Energy Program Agency, Joseph Mwangi, the representative now for the Head of Energy Division in African Union Commission, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I can say good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all from wherever you are. And my really sincere greetings from Nairobi, Kenya, where we have the headquarters of the United Nations Environment Program. It's my privilege and honor to be here with you today and deliver this introductory remark representing my organization, UNEP. But first, allow me to thank and congratulate the International Renewable Energy Agency for organizing this important workshop on enabling policies and regulatory frameworks for both geothermal power and direct use, which is particularly the direct use in this East African rift that really bring a paradigm shift to really achieve the different sustainable development goals. So we really thank Irena also for really inviting us to partner and to organize this workshop with the African Union Commission. As you all know, ladies and gentlemen, we are now in a crucial year for the environment, where our Secretary General, the UN Secretary General, launched the Decade of Action recently, a 10-year program to deliver all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. So coming to the energy aspects, by 2030, a universal and sustainable access to affordable and reliable energy services should be granted. The rate of improvement of energy efficiency is targeted to be doubled by 2030, and the renewable energy mix will be significantly increased. But if we see where we are today, particularly in the African context, I think Mr. Amjad has already touched it, we are really far behind. Do we really make it? I don't want to really give where we are, but particularly because you know it, we are far much behind in order to achieve these SDGs. So for us, the Sustainable Development Goals achieving by 2030 is elusive and requires all of us to redouble our efforts. So it's in this context that UNEP, particularly implementing the whole energy and climate change related projects to respond to these global and continental development agendas, the Agenda 2030, the African Union Agenda 2063, and the Paris Agreement on Climate Action in 2015. This is in the context of actually leading countries, specifically the African countries, to move towards climate resilient, resource efficient, and low carbon development strategies for sustainable development and human well-being. That's why my organization is really focusing the Africa office to help, particularly the African countries, to develop their renewable energy resources, particularly the geothermal program. So UNEP Africa office, I can say that really a pioneer to bring or to really lead the regional program, the Africa Regional Program, which was the Jeff-funded African Reef Geothermal Development Project in 2010. So as you know, the countries and the partners use the UNEP ARGO program as a regional hub to really bring and coordinate various partners and countries to maximize the benefit of the use of this geothermal. So particularly this ARGO project was continuously, focused in playing a catalytic role to attract investment in this geothermal development through mitigation of the risks associated particularly in exploration. But in order to do that, it has been mentioned that the upfront investment, the lack of adequate, just skilled manpower, the financing, particularly in the upper part and also down to development, the innovating financing scheme and the technology was really giving a lot of barriers to move towards where we are today. But the policy is really a critical path, particularly to drive, to attract the private investment to lead and to bring a paradigm shift where geothermal can really contribute to this renewable energy and achieve the sustainable development goals. So ARGO has been really since 2010 playing a major role, particularly expanding its geographical coverage from 6 African, I think East African countries to 15 in terms of the region, the East Africa region. Now it's expanding it to the whole Africa continent because geothermal has a versatile use, it's a direct use and you can find it everywhere and change this heat resource to wells and also to drive different catalytic sectors of the region. And ARGO has been really instrumental also in identification of the resources, particularly resource exploration, particularly in different African countries like Kenya, in Silali, Ethiopia, in Tandaho, Uganda, in Kibiro, and Tanzania, in Ngozi Songwe. We were trying really it was project-based to attract particularly investment, and through the African Union Commission Geothermal Risk Mitigation Facility and other developers like KfW, French Development Agency, ADB, and others. This is mostly for power generation. So we have been also playing an important role in close collaboration with AUC in developing the regional policy guideline that can be customized at each country level because each country has its own context. So we have to really guide them. We cannot rule just to do any kind of policy, but we give a policy guideline like Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, through the and Tanzania and Djibouti. That was really in 2014 and 15 what we really developed. Then the web GIS based, that really where you can find any kind of geothermal inventory database to access reports. This is actually UNEP was helping countries. The owners, the leaders are countries, but we are helping to really facilitate this. Particularly, this was in the context of attracting investment in line with the other policy. You all know that ARGO also has been really leading this to spur and strengthen the regional cooperation and also the private and public interest through its regional conferences of the ARGO conferences since 2012. I'm very pleased to tell you that since 2010, there is a paradigm shift in this region, having private developers in terms of PPP and IPP, more than 12, though the majority are in Kenya and Ethiopia, but we can see that in Zambia as well now we have. So this is really what we want to see. But if we don't have a clear and coherent policy, we can't do anything or attract investments, particularly in terms of the PPA and others, which we will discuss maybe later. Policy, actually, we really believe that it should be scientific and technically evidence-based solutions that we can give to develop policy. Otherwise, we cannot tell countries or just the decision makers that you have to develop policy. We have been wasting most of our time in the beginning to tell people to focus on policy for power generation where they don't have a geothermal system that is viable for power generation. So that was where the UNEP was really taking the lead and just put the 2016, the game changer for the Western Rift and others. So this is one of the things maybe we can discuss later. The other is just shifting from project-based to institutional support for setting up of the African Geothermal Center of Excellence, where we develop the business plan. We are very much looking forward to work with IRENA. African Union is our leading to set up this full-fledged. We thank the government of Kenya for really hosting this. So through interim project coordination of unit of this center, UNEP managed using the Kenyan and GDC facilities and also online more than 300 homegrown experts. So these are all very good to bring us to the other regions, actually to the other levels where we have a sustainable, actually kind of capacity development in a continuous manner. Very happy to see Mexico and others to come to us here to share their best practices, which is like a South-South cooperation. Thank you to IRENA. So in all these aspects, we are really very much looking forward, particularly now the policy is for us to bring the reality to action of the game changer, where the low to medium geothermal systems can be a reality in the whole Africa in the context of wave nexus. That is really very important. That is really what we really want to see, not only a standalone energy policy, but a harmonized policy that can drive the catalytic sector, powering the agriculture, energizing the industry, and also really the entrepreneurship where it can create job creation. So I think all in all, we look forward to this partnership with IRENA and AU to really bring a harmonized policy and changing to action to really bring the livelihood and the well-being of our nation. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the very fruitful interaction. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Meseret, for those wonderful opening remarks. We are going to the next session of the event, where we're going to be having some presentations. So first, we're going to hear about the main recommendations and the key findings of the East Africa Geothermal Market Assessment Report. And then after that, we're going to dive deeper into the discussions, where we are going to be taking a deeper dive into the enabling policies and regulatory frameworks. So these are the panelists, the speakers who are going to be making the presentations today. And for the East Africa Geothermal report, I am going to be giving you the key findings. So the report is titled Geothermal Development in Eastern Africa, and it contains the recommendations both for accelerating power generation as well as direct uses. So this report is an outcome of a workshop that was held in 2018 in Nairobi, organized by IRENA and the regional partners. And this workshop was focusing on the financing and risk mitigation. But it also agreed that it's important to have a deep understanding of the geothermal markets in East Africa, just beyond financing. And so during the report, the development of the report, we did a deeper analysis of the energy markets in 7 countries, but we believe that the recommendations from those analyses are applicable to all the countries in the region. So the report provides an updated status of geothermal development for the region, both electricity and direct uses. It also identifies the challenges that are hindering geothermal development. And it also provides recommendations on the actions that need to be put in place in order to accelerate the development. And of course, the effect of this is that geothermal has the potential to contribute greatly to the economic development in the region, as well as also providing access to energy to more than the 400 million people who live in this region. So the report looked at the wider energy sector, just to try and understand what energy resources are available, both for primary energy as well as for grid electricity. And what was found is that charcoal is the main source of energy for primary uses. And this is followed by gas and coal. But again, these are mostly in Mozambique and Tanzania, and was to some extent also in Zambia. With regard to electricity, hydropower is the main source of electricity, accounting for about 3/4 of the electricity installed capacity in the region. Then followed by that, following hydro is the non-renewable energy sources, which constitute about 20% of the installed capacity. But we also have other renewables like solar in most of the countries. When it comes to geothermal, we only have installed capacity for geothermal in Kenya as well as in Ethiopia. Now, when you look at the status of geothermal development in the region, what we see is that most of the geothermal fields in the 7 countries that were analyzed are still at the surface study stage or at the exploration drilling phase, with the exception of Kenya and Ethiopia, which have managed to go all the way and have installed geothermal power plants. Now, the reason for this is mainly because the countries have been finding it challenging to attract the capital that they need to develop their geothermal resources. And also something that we also noticed during the assessment is that the projects that are highlighted in orange, so these are projects that have already completed surface studies, and at the moment they're either at various stages of tendering to begin exploration drilling, and others are still in the process of raising financing to go into exploration drilling. Now, when you look at the main topic of today, which is policy, institutional, and regulatory frameworks, so the report also finds that the countries have put very high importance on the development of renewable energy. And in this regard, geothermal is expected to play a big role. With regard to the enabling regulatory frameworks, what we found is that Comoros is in the process of developing its regulatory frameworks for renewable energy. And of course, they mentioned that geothermal energy is going to play a big role in that. Djibouti is also another country that's also in the process of developing regulatory framework. And this is expected to open up the space for the IPPs to be involved in the development of their geothermal resources. Ethiopia, on the other hand, already has a legal and regulatory framework for geothermal resources that allows for the licensing of geothermal projects, both for direct use and as well as for electricity generation. In terms of the institutions, Djibouti has the Djiboutian Office for Geothermal Energy Development, which is charged with the responsibility of developing geothermal resources, while Ethiopia also has a number of institutions that are involved in geothermal development. But in the case of Comoros, there's a proposal to unbundle the water and the electricity management. And we believe that this is going to contribute a large way to the development of the geothermal resources. Kenya is also another country that has done a lot with regard to the policies and enabling frameworks. First, with the Mid Coast Development Plan for 2027 to 2017 to 2037 that identifies geothermal as a key source of electricity. Then there's also the feed-in tariff that was introduced in Kenya, as well as tax incentives which are offered to the geothermal developers. And more recently, the country provided letters of support to geothermal developers in order to ease their access to financing. In terms of institutional framework, Kenya has 2 institutions that are involved in geothermal development. That's GDC as well as KenGen. And in terms of the regulatory framework, a number of legal instruments are in place in Kenya to support geothermal development, including the Constitution and the Energy Act of 2019 that also recognizes the role of direct uses and allows for the participation of IPPs in geothermal development. When you look at Tanzania, this is also another country that has established an institution to deal with geothermal development, the Tanzania Geothermal Development Company. And in Uganda, within the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, the Department of Geothermal Development has been established to streamline activities related to geothermal. When it comes to the regulatory framework, we see in Tanzania that geothermal resources are licensed using the Mining Act, but the private IPPs are allowed to participate in geothermal development through the Energy Act. In Uganda, the same thing. The resources are licensed using the Mining Act, and electricity. The IPPs can participate through the Electricity Act. However, in Zambia, we didn't see much reference to geothermal resources in their policy and regulatory frameworks. Now, when you look at financing, this has been always a big challenge for geothermal projects to attract financing, mainly because of the high upfront costs that are required for geothermal projects before even the financial viability of a project can be established, and even before the resource can be confirmed. And because of these, most financiers put a very high risk premium on financing for geothermal resources. And this has, to a large extent, contributed to inadequate financing for geothermal projects. However, when we look at the actual reality is that over the years, the risk has been proven to be much lower than the perception. In the 1960s, the success rate of drilling exploration wells was about 45%, but in 2000, this has increased almost to about 85%. The actual reality is still that the perception for risk is quite high. And to address this, different financing options have been put in place and have been used in the region. First of all, public financing. This has been the most commonly used type of financing, and mainly for exploration and for drilling of exploration wells, and the acquisition of the equipment required for geothermal development. And this, of course, has been complemented by concessional loans, which have been obtained by the governments to support the later stages of development, like drilling of exploration wells, production wells, and the construction of power plants. Then recently, there's also been a lot of interest from the private sector, whereby they're coming in with their own equity. We've also seen the use of capital markets to raise money for geothermal projects through the public infrastructure bond offer. And also the grants have also played a very instrumental role in geothermal development, particularly for surface exploration as well as capacity building. And more recently, grants are also being used for risk mitigation, for example, in the GRMF, which is a great case that we are going to talk more about. And in terms of recommendations for financing, the report proposes to collocate both electricity and direct uses in order to support the de-risking of projects due to the diversified revenue streams. It also proposes early generation of electricity using wellhead technologies, as well as phased development of geothermal fields. And all this will contribute to the de-risking of the project and making it easier to attract financing. In terms of development models, public funds have played a big role, at least in every aspect of geothermal development, and particularly in the early phases of surface exploration. But then we've also started to see the private sector getting more involved, and the private sector can get into geothermal projects at different phases, depending on how much risk appetite that they want to take. Some of the models include where the private developers get in at the power plant development stage, while the public funds are used to do the exploration and also the drilling of wells. And this is happening in Kenya, in Menengai. We also have another example whereby the private sector comes in to do the exploration wells once the public sector has used the public resources to prove the existence of a geothermal resource. And once enabling policies and regulations are put in place then we also seen the private sector being more interested to get into the development at a much earlier stage, including for exploration drilling, as is happening with the new licenses that are being issued in Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Zambia. When it comes to direct uses, the report identifies only about 18 megawatts reported in the region, mainly in Kenya. But then there's also a very keen interest by the stakeholders in the region. And this was exemplified during the Kigali RGC7 conference, whereby the statement of the workshop was a call on the countries to streamline, to mainstream direct uses for the economic benefit of their citizens. And in order to achieve accelerated development of direct uses, a number of recommendations were made. One of them being to develop dedicated enabling frameworks, especially the roadmaps and licensing for direct uses, creating awareness, particularly among the policymakers and the communities and industries, and also developing demonstration projects to show the viability of these direct use applications. The report also recommends aligning geothermal development with industrial development plans so that both of them can be able to synergize on the strength of each other. And an example of this is in Kenya, where the special economic zone is being established in Naivasha, close to the Olkari geothermal field. When it comes to financing, of course, it's beneficial to collocate the direct use applications in power plants in order to be able to cut down on some cost, for example, the cost of drilling. And also it's important to demonstrate the viability of direct use projects. Then also the report recommends that it's important to also look at the shallow geothermal resources that exist in the region as one of the ways of encouraging the development of direct uses, particularly in the remote areas. Another finding of the report was that for a long time, it was assumed that the geothermal resources in the eastern and the western branches of the East African Rift were similar, but then further research revealed that the resources are quite different, at least from a geological perspective. Because of the lack of this information in the beginning, then the exploration programs that were being carried out in the region were using the techniques that were not very effective in identifying or discovering the geothermal resources. And so what has been proposed is that for the resources that are in the eastern branch, which are volcano-based, the exploration methods should be applied in such a way that the objective will be to find a geothermal reservoir below the volcanoes. While in the western branch, the exploration techniques should focus on identifying the existence of a geothermal reservoir along the fault plains. And the same case when it comes to the shallow geothermal resources, then the techniques should also focus on identifying the reservoir along the fault plains. When it comes to skills development, the international capacity building initiatives have for a long time played a major role in supporting the development of capacity in the region, led by the Geothermal Training Program in Iceland and the Geothermal Institute of the Auckland University, among others. Technical assistance programs have also played a key role in the development of the capacity for the region. But more recently, we're also seeing that local institutions are getting more involved in capacity building, including the local universities who have started to introduce geothermal courses, particularly at the master's level. Then we also saw the African Geothermal Center of Excellence, which was established to facilitate the capacity development in order to have enough manpower to be able to meet the region's objectives for geothermal development. And some of the public geothermal developers in Kenya, that is GDC and KenGen, also have their own geothermal training centers, which they use not only to build the capacities within the institution, but also to support the neighboring countries in capacity building. So the report proposes that apart from these technical capacity building, that there's also need to focus on geothermal transaction capacity building, particularly to assist the countries in procuring the independent power producers and also in negotiating of power purchase agreements. It also proposes that capacity building should also aim to support decision-making through coaching and mentoring, as well as supporting communities to understand the value that they can derive from geothermal, including for direct uses. And so it's also important that capacity building gives a critical look at direct uses. And over and above that, it's also important to look at the policies, the legal and regulatory frameworks, which we are doing today. So in conclusion, it's also been proposed that in order for geothermal development to continue growing, that it's necessary to have an interconnected power market in the East African region, so that excess electricity that can be produced in one country can be sold to the other countries. So yeah, those are some of the recommendations that we see in this report. So thank you very much for your attention. Now, for any questions that you might have, I urge you to write them down on the chat, and we're going to be responding to this at the end of the presentation. So in this presentation, we have seen that Kenya and Ethiopia are the only countries so far that have developed the legal and regulatory frameworks for geothermal. But we've also heard that some other countries are in the process of developing their own regulatory frameworks, and we expect that it's going to have a major impact in the development of the geothermal resources. So for the next session, we are going to have experts, both from the East Africa region and from Mexico, who are going to be giving us more information about their experiences with the development and the implementation of these enabling policies and regulatory frameworks for geothermal energy. And to begin, we are going to have Mr. Paul Mbuthi, who is going to be speaking about the role of policies and regulatory frameworks inspiring geothermal development in Kenya. So, Mr. Paul Mbuthi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jack, and thank you to everyone. It's a privilege and pleasure to also make a presentation during this stage and during this meeting. I want, before I begin, just to agree with the head of partnerships at IRENA that there is urgent need for clear policies. And I also wish to add that these policies need to be consistent, they need to be predictable, and they need to be coherent with other sector policies so that their impacts can be optimized. And so the role of policy and regulatory frameworks are very key in ensuring a robust growth and development as well as deployment of geothermal resource. So I'll be then speaking about the role of policies and the regulatory instruments inspiring geothermal development in Kenya. And in the next slide, I wish just to, first of all, give you an introductory statement about Kenya and the Ministry of Energy, which is the lead agency on matters energy. So if we can go to the next, the slide number 2, it just came, and I hope it gets there. Next slide. Yes, so the overall mandate of the ministry, just before you move on, is the next one, is the earlier one. The overall mandate of the ministry is really to look at the policies that are dealing with energy development and management, including geothermal exploration and development policies. In addition to the other overarching policy mandates in terms of the hydropower development, rural electrification program, as well as promoting renewable energy. In the next slide, I also wish to point out that Kenya has made significant strides in the geothermal resource development because we are endowed with the vast geothermal resources within the Great Rift Valley that transects the country from north to south. We have a confirmed potential that exceeds 10,000 megawatts, and which we believe is capable of meeting Kenya's electricity needs in the next decades. So harnessing these resources then provides a renewable, affordable, and a stable electricity supply. And it also indeed helps Kenya to fulfill her requirements under the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as well as the climate goals that are set out within the framework of the Paris Agreement. So in the next slide, if we can get to the next slide, Jack. This just gives you an indication of the prospects and where they are located. We have tried to list them. And this is so far as our exploration has shown within the Rift Valley system. The next slide. So what is the current capacity in the generation mix? And this, it may not be very clearly visible, but I wanted to point out that geothermal is contributing about 30% of the total installed power mix. But something important to notice is that in terms of the actual power generated, geothermal is the lead because it is contributing over 50% of the total power dispatch that is being sent to the national grid. Importantly, I need to point out that renewable energy generally is contributing 73% of the installed capacity, but in terms of dispatch, we are actually dispatching over 90%. And that means Kenya has a huge renewable energy component in the overall energy mix. And that's why we say it has a low carbon energy system. The next slide, we also wish to share the role of policies. And I believe that the policies are key in driving the pace of geothermal development priorities through allocation of budgetary resources and mobilization of concessional and private financing. Regulations, on the other hand, actually ensure a level playing field for all players that provide enabling investment environment, and as well as determine the generation sequencing in a manner such that the final electricity dispatch can be determined. So it is through regulations that the dispatch is controlled, so that we are able to say, for instance, Kenya is using what we call economic merit order. And that is to say, you start with the least cost up to the highest cost. So depending on the demand, the generation is really managed in a manner that you get the cheapest first and the most expensive last. So in this sense, and in terms of a government commitment, the government has introduced a geothermal development company, which is a 100% public institution, which receives regular annual budgets. And these budgets are the ones that provide like the seed money to leverage financing from different sources, including bilateral, multilateral partners, and has been able to unlock funds for upstream geothermal development. And when I say upstream, I mean the exploration processes. And this has been quite supported by partners. At the same time, the government of Kenya also introduced a public-private partnership unit, which is, of course, managing the act that is dealing with the public-private partnerships, and it is domiciled at the National Treasury, and it facilitates private sector participation in geothermal projects. Next slide. Now, just to give you an impression of how the private sector has evolved in the country, and this is through the independent power producers. And you can see right from 1996, when the first IPPs were introduced in the geothermal sector, there has been significant growth in terms of their role in generating geothermal power. And at the same time, in the graphics, you're also seeing the growth of the peak demand and the generation, and you can see how this is being matched, because ideally, a country needs to ensure that the peak demand is always covered, and therefore the power generation system must be made and sequenced in a manner that ensures there is adequate supply to meet demand, and with adequate reserve capacities to address any changes in the peak demand. Next slide. So just to give you an indication of how geothermal public-private partnership is being managed, and you can see the different stages of the geothermal development value chain, right from detailed service studies all the way to final power plants that are being constructed and are being operated. But you can see, I'm just indicating here that the GDC, which is the public geothermal development company, has been used as a critical instrument to de-risk the initial resource assessments so that investors are well cushioned. So you can see at different stages, GDC is being involved. And then at some certain clear stages, the independent power producers come in, particularly at the point of doing feasibility studies, because even though we do pre-investment studies, the investors need also to undertake their own validations of what initial assessments have been. And so you can see from that point that GDC is able to provide the very initial pre-investments up to and including appraisal drilling. That is geared to address the risk that investors may experience. And this, of course, was born from realization that geothermal development is a long-term affair. That meant that if an investor was not going to get the initial studies funded in the event of any dry well being realized, then that, of course, translated into huge losses. And that's why the government, through its own policies, decided to create an instrument that would de-risk that process. The next slide. So what has been the impact of the PPP, the public-private partnership, and the options that are there? It is important, of course, to notice that there are several scenarios, because where we are saying IPPs are entering at in the green field, that is to say they do everything. Of course, what it translates to is that the tariffs finally may have to be quite high. So if you look at the first scenario, where IPPs are entering before the tested drilling. You can see the tariffs are ranging from 14 to 17 US cents per kilowatt hour. Of course, many investors would prefer this option because it is a higher tariff. But then this also ensures that of course, the rate of return on these investments are approximately in the range of 25%. And so they consider this to be better returns. But in terms of the responsibility of government to ensure there is cheap power for the country, we also promote the scenario 2, where IPPs are entering after the tested drilling. EDC will remove most of the upfront risks, and the tariffs have been seen to come down. And you can see the range is between 6.5 to 10.5 US cents per unit. And that to the government is a clear benefit, because the government of course aspires to get cheap energy to support industrial processes. So that tells you that policies can actually drive the tariffs, policies can determine the sequence, policies can, and when I say policies, is together with the regulatory frameworks that are provided within these frameworks. So in the next slide, next slide, and I just wanted to conclude by saying that what we have outlined in this presentation is the fact that policies have a critical role. Regulations have a critical role, because that is what helps investors be able to have a same level of operating, so that new entrants, old entrants are well cushioned. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mbuthi, for your very informative presentation. So next, we are going to invite a speaker from Zambia, Mr. Peter Mender, who is the CEO of Kalahari Geoenergy Limited, a private geothermal developer based in Zambia, and is going to be providing insights concerning the opportunities, challenges, and lessons learned by geothermal developers in navigating the regulatory regimes. And he will be providing his insights from the perspective of a private developer. So, Mr. Mender, over to you.
Okay, good morning and afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Jack, for organizing. If you could please put up lights. I speak to you as a private developer. A bit of an intruder coming into the scene as an East African party, and as far as I know, I'm clearly in South Africa, where which is about 13 degrees and it's freezing. So I'm going to split this in two halves. I'm going to quickly go through what we are actually doing, because I think that is important to set the scene, because we're relatively low profile here. And then I will pick up some of the regulatory issues that apply to us and how we've addressed issues, with some throwaway remarks at the end. Next slide, please. Next slide. Have the next slide. Anyone out there? Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so first of all, to put Zambia in the context, as many of you may wonder why we're here in the first place. Zambia sits on the extreme southwest end of the East African system. I would be very happy to have a long geological conversation with, and I've not gone too far. That one. with anyone else about the geological position of Zambia, but our rifting events are all about 120 years older than the East African Rift. Some of them have been overprinted by subsequent events. And if we were able to go back to the previous slide, you could see the basins, the our 260 million year old rift basins that so a quick snapshot of what we ourselves are doing. This is taken from a recent our recent press statement last week, so it's on our website. But essentially, we've been conducting systematic exploration in Zambia for 9 years, or 10 years actually now. And okay, can we go forward one slide? We've passed that. And what we have found using all the standard techniques of geophysics, the drilling of 21 slim and gradient holes, totaling some 6,000 meters, is that we actually have a shallow tabular reservoir starting at about 200 meters below ground level, which has a temperature of about 108. 110 degrees, yeah, on that slide, please, thank you, at the unconformity of the Precambrian basement at the bottom of the sedimentary package. This is fed by a much deeper 130 plus upflow from within the base of rock. So we have a fault-hosted flow and a tabular reservoir outflow. And the idea, we are in the midst, in fact, exactly halfway through a feasibility study now, to commercialize the shallow outflow, and that will be finished late this year, and it's our intention to do the regulatory steps for development approval on the shallow outflow while we look both laterally on the structures and deeper for further resources. This has been entirely privately funded until the recent edition of the Renewable Energy Platform and a grant from US TDA for the actual ongoing feasibility study. Next slide, please. Jack, next slide. Anyone there? Next slide.
I've already gone to the next slide.
It's not showing yet. Sorry, we're one ahead of that now. Okay, this is a quick snapshot of what a tabular reservoir looks like in a fault-hosted. The red in the middle of the diagram is the upflow. In fact, we have multiple upflows in the basement, in the buried basement. Comes into the distributed part of the reservoir and then flows out into a tabular reservoir. So it looks like a bit like an umbrella with multiple hands, all held in place by the Karoo era or Permian cat rocks and coming to surface in a series of hot springs. We, in this first phase, are targeting the tabular reservoir, which is normally some 20 to 30 meters thick, just below the basement in the unconformity. Okay, next slide. Jack, can we move on one slide?
Yes, Peter, I've already moved to the next slide. Maybe you could switch off your video so that we can try to see.
It's not showing yet. We want to go on to the one that starts secondary for revenue. Okay, so the development, as I said, for power generation will be starting next year, but we have for a very long time always that our work is closely associated with the direct opportunities. And I know that these are now regularly talked about. Perhaps one difference here is that we are contiguous to the edge of a national park, and our presence is already helping to reduce the human and domestic animal conflict with the wildlife in the park. And the idea is that actually, as we go forward, we'll be able to do more of that. And it ranges from realigning tracks, security fencing, etc. The roles that are most suitable for direct applications for us are the typical suite of agricultural ones, starting with fish farming, for which we are doing a pilot plant now early next year, and moving through soya and groundnut outgrow schemes and processing to dairy processing, which will require some form of dairy enhancement program, as the 30,000 cattle in our area are all there for beef. Obviously, social uplift, which has been well discussed, the climate mitigation, food security, and finally, as I said, the fourth leg of our quadruple bottom line is the environmental enhancement of the park, which will then draw back tourism, therefore create more local revenue. And I believe that is very realistic. There is no for direct applications yet, but there are tax incentives, but they are relatively obscure, and it relates to who, whether it's the private or public sector that organizes and runs any resource utilization part. The other thing I would say, and I think it is part of direct applications, is secondary credits in the form of the recovery minerals elements. And in our case, it's not lithium, which everybody is raving about, particularly in Cornwall, where they're finding high-grade lithium. It is actually helium, which we have to the same concentrations as they're finding Rukwa for helium-1 in Tanzania. So we are looking at combining recovery of helium with the generation of power. And all that goes with it. So could we move on now to the second part, which is really the regular issues and the state of the economy, the energy economy. Okay, can we move on? Okay, so policy is derived in Zambia for, please move on when you can to that. The policy is derived from the National Development Plan, which is a 5-year plan, currently being updated to the 8th, which is in draft form. And that calls for diversification away from hydro for the reasons that I've listed in this slide, but I'm not going to read them all out of. There is also renewable energy strategy, and these come together into the new Electricity Act of 2000. Mentioned 3/4 of the way down the line, where the list, which clearly dismantles any of parastatal CESCO and allows independent power producers to generate, transmit, and distribute power within the country, and that all CESCO, in fact, all current grid lines in the country are designated as so there is equal opportunity to access them subject to capacity. I think worth picking up a couple of points from above that. The first of all is that Zambia has a much bigger installed capacity requirement than many countries in the region, primarily driven by its role as a significant copper producer and mining country. That affects domestic access. So some 78% go to the mines, only 14% goes to domestic access, and 96% of the rural population have no access. And that number has not really changed. And it's in the context of the 2030 pledge for universal access. In a country the size of Turkey, but with a population of Malawi, 16 million, the density of population is very low, and as a consequence, the cost of conventional distribution is is a challenge, and it's something that has to be done not just by power generators, but also transmission and distribution, which is the subject of increasing regulatory to encourage us. So from a geothermal point of view, we have a exploration license from the Ministry of Energy. And because we are the first mover, much has had to be shaped by what we find and what we do. Can we have the next, please? Quick look at the structure of electricity in Zambia. Jack, when you're ready, next slide. This slide, even if we skip straight over it, lays out the schematic of energy regulation and the country. You'll notice that at the moment it shows that everything really goes through the national utility, SESCO. However, if you look down hand side in the dotted line, you actually see that new projects are able to go direct to the consumers. And I think that for the will be the way ahead with further commerce and industry direct off-takers the utility altogether. There is also here the opportunity to sell within SAPS, the Southern Africa Power Pool, which Zambia sits in the heart of it. And there are various synthetic power purchasing being developed, which allow the power to be purchased from independent power producers and then sold on first to the nation and on second call within SAPS by independent entities. If we to the penultimate slide, Zambia developed is developing a power development framework, which is part of which is outlined in the next slide. There are a number of steps. I believe that there are 23 steps from an independent power producer to get. And the aim is that these are all brought together by the Department of Energy and Energy Regulation Board to remove the many hurdles. But one interesting aspect of the power development framework is that they are all related. So, for instance, you're looking down the right-hand side, the implementation agreement, which would be our next hurdle, having got that far down the list, is 45 days, and the Energy Regulation Board initial approval to generate is 30 days. And the other bits and pieces also have shorter timelines. And if they fail to be met, then it is the developer is given permission to carry on rather than having to wait for a decision. And I think that is a very positive step. You can then work out your timeline very clearly, that there are certain cut-off times for each step of the way through. The final slide, please. The last slide. One more slide. Okay, in the slide I've listed some of the challenges, somewhat tongue-in-cheek. I start off by saying, and I think some people have heard me say it before, that are we in Africa or are we in East Africa? all of the Karoo sedimentary basins, which run from the equator in the Congo all the way to Cape Town, have geothermal systems, some of which are being exploited for spas, other of which remain untouched. And I think we need to be more inclusive in Africa about where we're coming from, because these fault-hosted systems and tabular reservoirs, which have been touched upon before, are a reality in much of Africa, many of the countries that have, or all the countries that have Karoo basins. From a regulatory point of view in Zambia, when we applied for a license, it took us a year to find a home. We tried mining with energy. And I think since then, I congratulate Zambia on its pace of capacity building and keeping up with what's going on both nationally and within the country, spurred on obviously by the challenges of climate change on which is the main source of power. I think that putting in a demo plant of half a megawatt or so is something which attractive to many people here as a capacity building, perhaps not so attractive to us because it's a capital cost that we will have to meet. I think as sort of general advice to people who are looking to do this themselves is, and that's what the rest of these points are about, is that got to secure an initial capital. And if I was a funder, I would get very bored of listening to investors coming back with the same story or trying to too early. I think that it's very important that one reviews your progress against your model and updates it. Always keeps an eye on whether it's going to be commercial or not. And I think one of our advantages is that our tabular reservoir is only at 300 meters below ground. And it's under pressure. It flows itself significantly. A 3-inch well, internal diameter well, flows about tons of 110-degree fluid an hour. 98 cubic meters. I question sector sitting here whether the GRMF facility is too onerous, and certainly we have made a conscious decision not to follow through on it. I don't think that I think that it is a general misconception from the mining industry that I find it surprising that developers are not prepared to take risk. The mining industry is all about risk, and the geothermal industry should be the same. The developers need to be prepared to take risk hit to exploration before they have the route through to a PPA in place, because it's not going to happen unless they do. I also think the contractors are making too much out of this. I think if you employ a global name, you're going to find it very expensive. Whereas if you go for a less expensive startup, they're going to be learning on your job. So it's important to have some very good supervision on your side as opposed to the contractor's side. I also think that people should buy, not hire, key equipment and instruments. And finally, I think that people should ask in this industry. We're all trying to do the same thing, and I don't see too much in question and answer. And I managed to keep that in time, and I hope it's a different perspective to the pure East African approach. Jack, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that wonderful presentation. So now we want to cross over to another region of the world in Latin America, a region that has been utilizing geothermal for quite some time, mainly for electricity generation, but more recently they have started taking steps to integrate direct uses as part of their geothermal development plans. And so we're going to be having two speakers from Mexico who will be sharing with us their experiences. And we hope that these experiences will really be useful for the East Africa region. So to begin us off, we're going to have Ms. Michelle Ramirez. She's a program officer for the Global Geothermal Alliance at ARENA, and she'll be sharing a presentation about the methodology for developing geothermal direct use regulatory frameworks. Ms. Ramirez, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jack. Thank you very much to all our attendees. I am glad to join you today to share our experience in Latin America developing geothermal regulation and how we have done it. We have very little time, and I am sure that there will be some doubts and questions that I will be happy to directly support you later if I cannot address something today. So let's get started. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Thank you. First, I want to tell you that the methodology that I will be presenting today has a series of basic steps to design regulation. Each opportunity I have applied this methodology or that it has been used by others, it has suffered modifications. In this sense, you must know that the methodology can and should be adapted to your context. The regulation must always be tailored. Now we will see those general steps in each case that must be applied to your own reality. That said, let's continue with the methodology. Next slide, please. Next. Thank you. The stages of developing a regulation for direct uses of geothermal are these. There are 6, and we are going to comment on each one. Next slide, please. Okay, the first stage is the understanding of the current situation. This is the most critical stage of all. The regulatory mechanism success depends on how well these activities are done. As it is the most critical stage, and everything depends on it, we can return to this stage whenever we find a new situation that needs to be analyzed. Again, we see the next slide, please. Thank you. So it can also be understood as a permanent stage during the development of the regulatory project. The first step is to understand the general regulatory context from the broader norms, such as constitutions, to more specific and complex regulations. In addition, it should be understood that even though there are no specific regulations, this should not be understood as a prohibition. In this sense, the first step is to know what will have to be done to implement a project of direct use under the current legal framework. Understanding that the challenges and restrictions that projects face now. In the case of direct uses, it is convenient to carry out 2 exercises. The first one will be to know how to implement a greenhouse or a food dehydrator project, which usually has a lower environmental and social impact, and it's considered smaller. The second exercise will be the same, but this time for district heating, which is considered a larger scale project. The 2 exercises should be done, even if it is known that the regulation will only initially serve projects with less impact, since their general rules must apply to both projects indistinctly. In addition, regulation usually remains for several years, so the projects we have now may grow and be different in the future. Therefore, if the rules we establish can be applied to a wider set of projects, our regulations will age better and need less or no amendments. Now, in case having a previous regulation for geothermal, for instance, for power generation, it is necessary to analyze how these rules could be applicable to direct use projects and what opportunities and challenges can be drawn from that regulation. Likewise, it is necessary to analyze how projects are under development will be affected by a new regulation. It's also necessary to ensure a full understanding of the technology, its business areas, the sites with potential, and the differences direct use projects has against power generation project. We must also analyze previous made efforts to regulate direct uses, and if there are any, find out why they were not successful. In addition to the regulatory review, a cross-sectional regulatory analysis must also be carried out to ensure that the new regulation is in harmony with the rest of the regulatory framework. And by cross-sectional regulatory analysis, I mean that not only energy or water regulations should be reviewed, in some places mining, but also environmental, social, real estate property, construction, tax regulations, among others that may be found along the way. So as you can see, this is a desk investigation, just to start. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we're now in stage 2. The objective of this second stage is to set a goal for the regulation to be created. To do this, we must gather first-hand information. During this stage, we should approach the stakeholder involved in direct uses and listen to their concerns, needs, and wants. Academia, industry, and regulators must have the opportunity to express their ideas. So interviews, sectorized meetings, and workshops in which all sectors are represented should be carried out. This is even advisable to invite to these meetings or workshops to geothermal power generators if there are any. And ensuring that the conversation is carried out in a constructive and positive way without losing insight the risk and challenges is also a recommendation. So with the information obtained up to this point, and once the regulation challenges have been identified, it will be convenient to see the best practices and international experience. So by this time, we will have enough information to set the objective of the regulation and its main characteristics. The objective of the regulation must always be clear. It is not always the same objective. The aim may be to promote the industry, to ensure compliance of projects already underway, or correct rules that are no longer useful, among many other as specific as the circumstances require. So the regulatory objective does not always have to be to create a law. It can be an instrument of a lower hierarchy, or to integrate a series of new provisions in the law or decree that already is in force. It can even be to eliminate some rules. In short, each case, as previously said, is particular and different. And at the end of this stage, you must have different and specific solutions. Next slide, please. Okay. During the third stage, corresponding to feasibility analysis, many times, if this step is skipped, regardless of whether the regulation is spotless, it cannot be implemented. Then the first will have been in vain. Once possible regulatory solutions are in place to meet the state objective, legal, administrative, financial, and political feasibility analysis must be carried out. So first, the legal analysis must be performed to ensure that there will be no problems with the applicability of the regulation. This test is usually positive or allows potential issues to be detected early. Also, an analysis of administrative feasibility must ensure that the organizational resources to implement the regulations, such as sufficient personnel, properly trained personnel, update software and hardware equipment, among many others. So you will see that everything is in order to pass this new regulation. Later, the financial analysis to ensure that their resources are available to implement the regulation, from the publication to other necessary investments. Usually, I suggest doing the analysis in this order: legal, administrative, and financial. Regarding the political analysis, this can be carried out at any time that is considered appropriate, at the beginning or at the end. It is always essential to consider the political climate and possible changes as consequences of elections. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So next phase is draft and review the document until final version is reached. And for this activity, a task force can be installed, new workshops and seminars to showcase the documents. The document can be held so that the document takes into account and solves all concerns of all sectors involved and does not create new challenges, which is quite common. Regardless of the attention to regulatory and specific aspects related to direct uses of geothermals, I recommend taking these aspects you're seeing now into account in legal documents in general. So first, comprehensive, ensure that nothing is missing. As I mentioned when talking about the first stage, the regulation must be cross-sectional. It must be complete, ensuring that we do not forget to regulate any issue at an adequate level. Next one will be irreducible. Irreducible, especially when we create new laws, we tend to regulate more than is strictly necessary. We repeat the rules established in other legal documents, or we try to control unnecessary issues. And now the text must be coherent, as Mr. Paul Budi from Kenya said in his previous presentation. It's very accurate. So our legal text must be coherent without any kind of internal or external contradiction. It seems like unnecessary to comment on it, but it's common to see contradictory legal text, especially when only some articles are amended in a hurry. So keep this in your mind. And finally, realistic. It is easy to create texts that are not down to earth when enough interviews and workshops were not carried out. So that is the objective of having interdisciplinary task forces. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Now, well, the fifth stage is the presentation. It seems to me that is self-explanatory. So the main suggestion here is that the presentation of the document is done in a practical way by someone who has been involved in the development of the document from the beginning, from the first stage. And finally, the follow-up. It is always advisable to set some measurables to test the performance of the new or improved regulatory framework, as legal texts are living documents that respond to social reality and reality changes. The rules must follow. So these are all the stages and the methodology. It was a quick presentation. I hope you find it helpful for you. And I think I will see you in the Q&A session. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jack.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for that wonderful presentation and for sharing with us these necessary steps when it comes to the development of a regulatory framework for geothermal direct uses. So our next and last presentation will again be from Mexico, and it will be done by Mr. Ernesto Hernandez, who is a partner and finance leader in an incubator and consulting firm, La Cajarota, where he fosters entrepreneurship in early stages of project development. He was also an administrator of the Energy Sustainability Fund at the Mexican Ministry of Energy. And he'll be speaking about the Mexican technology roadmap for geothermal power and direct uses. Mr. Hernandez, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jack. You want me to project the presentation? Or?
I am doing it for you. Just a minute, please.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm going to walk you through our experience in Mexico when we built and developed the technology roadmaps for every renewable source, including geothermal power and direct use. So next slide, please. Well, let me talk you first about our tools, policy tools. We were lucky enough to have a policy instrument last decade, the energy sectorial funds. These were trusts where by law we received money from the oil income that in each year the Congress here in Mexico states how much money would be entering the country regarding oil sales. So 0.65% of that budget goes directly through research and development to two funds, one for hydrocarbons and one for sustainable energy. So this the objective of this fund, the Energy Sustainability Fund, was to foster R&D projects, deployment, infrastructure enhancement, capacity building, scholarships, everything related to sustainability, energy sustainability, right? So between 2014 and 2018, we worked really hard developing and supporting several projects, including two big projects in the geothermal area. The first one was, here you can see SEMIEGEO. It stands for Mexican Innovation Center for Geothermal Energy. It was a project where we gather more than 30 institutions, including universities, research centers, the industry. Here in Mexico, we have a state company that is in charge of distribution of and transmission of electrical energy. So they were also part of this group. And it was a 4-year project that started in 2014 and ended in 2018. And we also supported another project. This was made in collaboration with the European Union. And this was focused on cutting edge technology back then. It enhanced geothermal systems and super hot geothermal systems. So these were the kind of projects that we could foster when we have this really important tool, a policy tool. It is vital for a country to strive when you want to promote any kind of planning or any kind of project. Next slide, please. Well, let me talk you really fast about the SEMIEGEO, the Mexican Innovation Center. It had 3 axes or lines of research. One was the part of the diagnosis, the assessment of natural resources and geothermal availability. Mexico is located in a region in the world where we are lucky to have several geothermal sites or sites with geothermal power, well, geothermal heat that we could or we can take advantage of in its exploitation. Another line of research was the development and innovation for exploration exploitation techniques, how we can explore and exploit this earth heat. And another axis was the direct uses that we in the last century it wasn't that that researchers didn't focus on that axis, but last decade and in this century we know it's an important area for research and development, right? And these 3 axes crossed with other 3 lines of actions. We call them. One for human development. We can't work in any of the axes without having the human resources capable of managing every research and policy we developed. We also wanted them to work with entrepreneurship and commercialization, how we can take all this research and discoveries and everything to the commercial area or to the productive area, right? Many of the research that we have done in the past just stays in papers, and it doesn't make the transition to being useful in the productive areas. And the last one is something Michelle was talking about, policies, right? Policies and regulation, how we can download all this research to actual implementation and deployment. Next slide, please. So, well, I talked about two projects, the SEMIE and the other project was HEMEX, the one about enhanced geothermal systems. But between these two projects, we realized that we were doing the policy and the implementation backwards, right? We should have planned first, and then we should have built and constructed these big projects. But regardless of this, we in 2016, we decided to implement a planning methodology that helps everybody understand, from the SEMI and from other participants, and even outside of Mexico with other partners in USA and Europe and South America. We decided that we need to have a common vision of where we need to take every renewable energy project for all the renewable energies that we wanted to explode, like geothermal, obviously, solar photovoltaic, inland wind energy, bioenergy, ocean energy, etc. So we decided to make this planning exercise with a group of experts in planning methodology. They didn't necessarily have to be energy experts, because they were going to conduct the planning exercise, right? Obviously, with some or several experts that came from the SEMIE and from the industry in general. Next slide, please. So this technology roadmap was built on a really simple 4-step methodology. The first one was to get a framework. So what does this mean? Is that we needed to build and research and do all the diagnosis of how the state of the art was, the cutting edge technologies, the situation in Mexico, the situation in all over the world, what techniques, what technologies were useful, which were obsolete, etc. Right? And with this, we published 2 documents. The first one is the technological diagnosis, and the second was a technology intelligence report. This was the entrance or the input to the exercise, all this research about the state of the art. That was the first step. Next slide, please. Then the second step was the workshop design and planning. We decided that we needed a decision-making consultative group, even though we knew we had maybe hundreds of participants and experts and stakeholders in this that could or make additions to the methodology. We knew that the first thing we needed to state was a clear objective, and since we were in the government and we were the ones funding this, and we had to follow our goals for Agenda 2030 and everything, we made a small decision-making group of where we had the state enterprise CFE. We had the government back in the Energy Secretariat. We have the leaders of the SEMIE. We have the leaders of the industry, but to make a decision-making consultative group which could state the main lines for where we wanted to take the geothermal energy for Mexico, right? But this group was really small. It had maybe 6 or 7 people, and but they were going to conduct this exercise. But we obviously wanted to gather as much information and as much opinions from all the stakeholders that could be involved. So there we also designed who we were going to invite to this workshop, right? The third step is the actual workshop. We took like 3 days separated by a pair of weeks. And we had participants for every sector, the industry, the public state company, Semiegeo, the Energy Secretariat, the regulators, the Science Council, even the International Energy Agency. We also had, it was important really, the participation of CONAGUA. CONAGUA is the water council or the water authority. That they even though their objective is not to make policy or oversee energy, we know that for the exploitation of geothermal resources, you necessarily have to at least talk and take into account the opinion of the water council, right? So we try to make this group as robust as possible, so we could state a policy understood by everybody and built by everybody, right? So in this workshop, everybody discussed and everybody put their opinion on the table, and we translate to what we can see in the next slide, please. Here's the result, right? The roadmap construction. Let me, the one at the left is the power generation with geothermal energy. During the course of the planning and the discussion, all the experts agreed that we needed a second roadmap for the direct uses because they were really important and growing technology, growing applications. So our original idea was to have a general roadmap for geothermal energy, but during the discussions and the construction of the roadmap, we decided to make a totally separate exercise for the direct uses, right? So you can't see the details here. I just want to let you know how it looked. I don't want to focus too much on the actual results, but on the exercise, right? So here in the left side, we can see that the group established certain goals to achieve for 2030, how the capacity would be incremented, and with several layers of different areas, right? The social area, the academic area, the policy area, the environmental area. So everything was taken into account, or we tried to take into account everything. And everybody was at least knew they were participants in the building of this technology roadmap that serves as a policy, right? So nobody could later say that they weren't invited or they didn't participate, even though if they didn't agree 100% on the results, at least they knew how it was built. And this exercise was very rich for us and for the sector, the academic sector, the industrial sector, to know where we were going together as a country, right? The next slide shows some other two documents. Please, we downloaded all these graphical roadmap to actual documents that can be consulted. That is a portfolio of R&D in the technological geothermal area. In the left, it's for power, and the right is for direct uses. This can be consulted. It's public here in Mexico for any stakeholder or interested enterprise, interested academy that wants to know where we are aiming to go for 2030, right? So this is in general the exercise we did here in Mexico. We I'd like to go to the next slide just to show you my conclusions. And they are, I didn't want to focus on the technical and specific results of the roadmap, because I would need like 3 hours for that. But what I actually wanted to share with you was the exercise, right? And these bullets that I'm going to be talking about. The first, the day we published the roadmap, we know that the next day it was beginning to become obsolete, right? The plans are made to be dynamic and be updated regularly. The substance that what we learned from this is not necessarily the plan and the roadmap, but the exercise of building it and having everybody participating in the creation of it. The planning activities should not end with the publishing of the roadmap or of the policy we're trying to build. We need to keep updating and replanning and reacting and trying to predict. For example, I listened several, like 1 month ago, that El Salvador, the Central American country, was adopting Bitcoin, right? And one of the things they said, they were going to use the geothermal power to take mining capacities of Bitcoin to El Salvador. So this happened like from one day to the other. Obviously, if they were doing a planning exercise 2 years ago, they wouldn't have this initiative or this area considered in their planning. So they must adapt and try to include now or integrate this new technology use, right, or appliance for geothermal power. As I'd say, appliance should be dynamic. If it's not changing, if it is of no use. And lastly, I'd like to conclude, like, we need to embrace planning as a regular activity, and we need to plan, or we're going to be planted if we do not. With this, I conclude. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm open to questions in the next section. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hernandez, for that wonderful presentation that you shared with us today. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the presentations. And now I would like us to just take a few minutes to engage in a panel discussion. And I encourage the participants, if you have any questions that you would like, that you might have from this event, please send them through the chat so that we can discuss them with the panelists. So as we go to the panel discussion, I would like to introduce 2 more gentlemen who are joining us for this panel discussion. The first one is Dr. Peter Mender. So Dr. Mender is a renowned geothermal expert in the East Africa region. He's an energy resource consultant and a researcher with the Scientific Engineering Power Consultant based in Nairobi. He's a member of the board of the International Geothermal Association, as well as the president of the IGA Africa branch. Dr. Mender, welcome. And next, I would like to introduce Mr. Kai Imola. Mr. Imola is an advisor of the German professional service company, Rodl & Partner, and he supports geothermal projects from the public and the private sector. He's also the project manager of the technical consulting team that is supporting the African Union Commission in all its operations regarding the GRMF. Mr. Imola, welcome.
Thank you, Jack.
Yeah, so maybe to begin us off, I would like to pose a question to Dr. Mender. And this is a question regarding the development of the policies and regulatory frameworks. So we've heard from the presentation that Kenya and Ethiopia are the countries that already have these regulatory frameworks in place, but also other countries in the region are in the process of developing their regulatory frameworks. And at least 4 countries were identified during the the market assessment. And so the question that I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the challenges that you think these countries might be facing with regards to the development of these policy and regulatory frameworks, at least based on the experiences of Kenya and Ethiopia? Over to you, Dr. Mender.
Thank you very much, Jack. I'd like to state that we participated with the arena in developing some of what Jack presented. That we thank all the people that gave us the information. In terms of the legal and regulatory framework in the region, we realize whereas Kenya and Ethiopia have developed very, very impressive legal and regulatory framework, it's in terms of the low temperature direct utilization, that's still lacking. In all these policies, you hear it mentioned that it will be developed. And this is an area that, for my part, as part of director of the International Geothermal Association, we feel that this is an aspect that should be focused on, because low temperature direct use is the key to really changing the economy of Africa, or in the Eastern Africa region. And here, in terms of many aspects, low to medium temperature is cheaper to develop because you don't need to develop very, very deep resources, shallow resources. In terms of project implementation, it should be cheaper because you'll be looking at smaller power plants, smaller direct use facilities. And therefore, what we are looking at is that more money should be put into this aspect. We know Kenya is trying to do that, many countries in Africa, Eastern Africa, but if you have a discussion with them, it comes to funding. These projects are being done, but not easily funded. And I'm sure Kay will mention this, because GRMF looks like is getting to that aspect that has been a major challenge. And therefore, as policies being developed in the region, they should be focused on both power, but also direct use. And target attached to it is a capacity development, not only for the engineering aspects of it, but even the communities that live near where geothermal resources are. They need to be upgraded in terms of their knowledge of the resources and what can be done, so that when the policies are being done, it is being done in a way that the community would be accepted to them. Those are some of the key things that I would like to mention at this point. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mender. And maybe just to do a follow-up on that, I would like to pose a question to Dr. Meseret. You've mentioned about the work that RGO is doing in the region during your opening remarks. And I'm just wondering, with regard to the development of policies and regulatory frameworks, what kind of support is RGO giving to the countries?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jack, and thank you all partners for giving this opportunity. Indeed, for us, as I mentioned, and thank you for Dr. Mender also for really bringing this aspect, and this is what we want to hear also from Irena, and on the top of what UNEP is doing. Basically, for us, as I mentioned earlier, we have given to countries the scientific and technical based information by actually really clearly identifying the type of resource they have when it's compared with the Western and Eastern branch of the East African Rift system, where they have a different system that should be looked at in terms of exploration, in terms of actually even the methodology they deploy, even the kind of policy that is required. From that aspect, I think now we really managed the expectation where most of the member countries are really looking at, like now you can see Rwanda, Uganda, and partly Tanzania and Zambia, thanks to Peter that bringing this, and Malawi, Mozambique, and others. Not only that, even now coming like Nigeria and Cameroon, and also in the northern part of Africa, they are really looking at, they have been doing it, but now they are looking at the use of this geothermal as a direct use application. So in that case, what we need is actually this is how we can really create this indigenous resource, particularly community owned, which is driven by community. This is an indigenous resource which should be looked at how we can empower the community, and also based on that, the women and youth, particularly as you see, Africa is a youth population where this kind of natural resource can benefit or spur the economic growth and the livelihood of this people. Basically, I can give a very good example what we are currently doing in Kenya as a pilot for this direct use application in Nakuru, where we are trying to bring one, we work on the technology aspects where geothermal can be really hybridized with solar in order to drive the climate smart agriculture, and it is focusing on community-based on smallholder farmers. This is also in the context of post-COVID recovery. One, it will really create food security because we are going to put all the kinds of, the applications like the milk pasteurizing, the greenhouse, any kind of crops, the fish farming, and then we are just introducing this technology. Second, we are just trying to see it is not only growing that, but we introduce how solar also can add value in terms of storage, in terms of conservation, and in terms of also, pumping water and others. This is one. Second, we are really bringing to see where the community can really own it and build, or we inject entrepreneurship to create job and to really also generate income, increase productivity, and to create sustainability. This is, I think, the future of Africa that is going to be done. So what do we need to translate this? We need not a standalone energy policy. We need a harmonized policy where, thanks to Mr. Paul Butihuer in this his presentation, we have to really bring all catalytic sector, all ministries to sit together and bring and develop a policy where it can drive the sustainable development, because we all agree that energy is a critical player to achieve the whole sustainable development goal. So that is where we are playing an important role. We are having a concrete projects on the ground. And I want, as you know, Jack, UNEP is developing, as per the request of countries, a technical guideline actually for the direct use application, which is actually community-based and mostly the technology, the exploration, and all the development paths. So that is where we are doing, and we really want to play a role. And I echo what Dr. Omenda said, and that is what we really want to see. Jack, we are very happy Irena is now jumping on the food systems, which can be a complementary. We know that the World Bank ISMAP is also doing the global aspects with focus in Africa. I think we will avoid duplication of efforts, create synergy, and we can really develop further for these direct use. The CTC and also from UNEP, the Green Max is also doing. I see the critical thing in the finance aspects from that angle, I think where we can really borrow. So we really put together, create synergy and maximize the benefit of our continent to use this resource, the diversified use of energy resource. Thank you very much, Jack, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Meseret. I think these are very important issues that you've raised, and I particularly note the issue about the harmonized policies, and as well as the issues on direct use. And this, we're going to come back and discuss more on this too. But before that, I would also like to pose a question to Mr. Kai, and this is regard to the GRMF financing. So far, GRMF has been providing financing, and from the opening remarks, it's now in the 7th round. And the question that I want to pose to you is regarding the utilization of the GRMF funds. How has it been progressing, and the challenges that the developers are encountering with regard to the utilization of these funds? Do you think they can be addressed through policy and regulatory frameworks?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jack, for this question. And of course, thank you for setting up this webinar. Very interesting. Well, what we see with GRMF is that also we have a quite strong financial contribution, so up to 80%, for example, for survey study and 40% for the drilling. Still, we see, and we have created over the last 7 years a quite large project pipeline now of 35 projects, but still we see that, let's say, 2/3 of these projects are kind of struggling to really get to the particular stages. Now, I would say for the last 1.5 years, of course, there was COVID-19 also having an influence above all on the public sector. And but we see these delays in the private and in the public part. And of course, policy regulation is to a certain extent the key, or let's say the barrier, and of course also in the same moment the solution probably. If we, for example, look at Ethiopia, how long it took, and I really would like to highlight now Tulamoye, for example, where the Icelandic developer Reykjavik Geothermal was behind. I think it took them more or less 10 years to get finally to the PPA stage, which then of course opens the possibility for discussions, negotiations regarding equity provider, to really get that foot on the ground, let's say, and then really to have the spot in, and now right now even having the drillings. And I think we will see even end of the year Corbetti as next project. So you see how long and how essential it is to have this regulatory framework in place. But even others, let's say, for example, in Ethiopia, are still holding back to a certain extent because it's always the complete package. So even if you have, for example, mining laws sorted out, that's fine. Then there could come up something with water rights. Then there could come up something with access rights. And of course, still, I see the PPA is one of the main obstacles, because then, of course, the bankability of the project gets into, let's say, focus. And besides that, also another issue, what we see where they struggle from time to time is the environmental and social. So to streamline all these things together and see it as one package for the policy, I think this would be already one thing. Maybe another issue is, or maybe two more issues. Yeah, maybe one issue is, first of all, that we also see in our talks directly with ministers, that geothermal is sometimes even not, that they're not aware, let's say, of the great potential of geothermal that they have, and of the large advantages that geothermal has, because it's baseload. So they are already kind of in a competing situation with other renewable energies, for example. So with PV, which show up with quite low LCOE, so levelized cost of electricity, but still geothermal is very baseload. And another issue I really would like to say, after now the floods we even have seen here in Germany 1 week ago, is that it's very, very stable, and it doesn't depend on any climate or weather conditions. And this thinking of adaptation also of energy supply systems is a clear advantage for geothermal. And but maybe jumping back also to the PPA, there it gets into policy. And I appreciate very much the efforts undertaken in Kenya, where they have a quite clear and transparent policy in this regard. But in other countries, of course, it's clear they are still discussing within the ministries also if they really open it up to private independent power producer, if they stay with the public ones. But of course, the speeding up, let's say, the market development, of course, it would be essential to open the market here. But this is, of course, far beyond all the geothermal regulatory issue. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you very much for that. Now, I'd like to move on to Mr. Hernandez. And I would like to ask you a question regarding the development of the map, the plans for both geothermal electricity as well as geothermal direct use. I know you mentioned that the focus of the presentation was really on the process and not on the results. But just briefly, I was just wondering whether you could share with us some of the key features of these plans, both for electricity and direct use.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, the power generation roadmap states that Mexico would double its installed capacity from 2017 to 2030. The installed capacity was less than 1 gigawatt, and we were trying to go to 2 gigawatts more or less. Well, this wasn't an invented number. It was based on several sites and potential projects that were being developed in that moment, and that the expert thought that they could develop through this decade, right? So that's the main result for the power generation roadmap. Obviously, it sounds easy, but it had a lot of actions, sub-actions, and activities that were needed to be made by the academic corps, by the lawmakers, regulation, everything, right? Like it was like a recipe or what you need to do to action all these all the mechanisms to try to get there, right? So that was the power generation roadmap. The direct uses was kind of similar, but its goals weren't as clear as the power generation, because as I said, it was green land. It was something really new. We knew that we could certain sites in the Republic where we could use cascade uses, like going from greenhouses to food technology to some several applications. Well, and an important aspect of it was the social embrace of the technology, right? Even though in Mexico, geothermal has been important since last century, from when the CFE, the state enterprise, started exploding the geothermal energy. It has several issues with the society, with the social layer in Mexico. So that was one of the most important areas that the roadmaps aimed and focused on. So and well, there were maybe dozens of actions in each of the roadmaps, and I'll be glad to send you the links. I think we translated them, but I don't know if they are public, the translations in English. So, but I'll try to get them and I can send them to you if you like to get a deep dive there and read them and understand what we try to do here.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hernandez. And now I would like to move on to Ms. Ramirez. And I have a follow-up question regarding the methodology for developing the regulatory frameworks for direct uses. You mentioned the need to have for these regulations to be integral, meaning that they should be complete, but also at the same time they need to be reducible in that you should not express more than what is necessary. And I was wondering, how do you strike a balance between these two aspects?
Yes, I think it sounds a bit contradictory, but it's actually not. And I think it's also related with the human part involved in the methodology. So the methodology itself, it works, but where you could have this kind of distractions and your regulation cannot be integral is because of the people we are involved in the developing of the regulation get distracted or forget something. So yeah, as I think it is explained with the coherent part. So as I was saying, yes, irreducible, because especially when you create laws, we tend to regulate more and repeat things that other regulatory documents already published, already said. So that's where the irreducible part goes. And for the comprehensive and integral part, it's just to be sure you're not saying, you're not missing anything. So the balance, I think it is between don't say anything you don't need to say, because it could be create another problem, and do as is strictly necessary. This is a case, regulation is a case where always less is more.
Okay, thank you very much, Michelle. I would now like also to pose a question for Mr. Peter Mender from Kalahari. And this is regarding the use of geothermal energy in the mining industry. You mentioned that at the moment, most of the energy being generated in Zambia is being used in the copper belt for refining copper. And I was wondering whether there are any plans to also look into geothermal and use it for such kind of industrial activities.
Regarding copper, what was your question?
So the question is regarding the use of the electricity that is generated in Zambia for copper, in the copper industries. And I was just wondering whether there are any plans to also, as the country plans to develop its geothermal resources, are there any plans to integrate the development of geothermal with copper mining?
I think stands out is that the copper industry here is growing, obviously because of the interest in copper as an EV metal. More power. There's only so much you can do to reduce power in a 24-hour. Renewable energy is not non-dispatchable or variable renewable energy is not. The mines have looked at ways of reducing demand slightly up, particularly if you view the copper demand over the next 10 years. To keep its place, Zambia needs to produce about 1.3 million tons of copper from its about. So the demand will get greater. I don't think more hydro is particularly practical, given that on the big reservoirs of the Zambezi Valley. Add a couple of degrees of climate change. 5 degrees in the Zambezi Valley. Nobody's yet come up with an evaporation number for an extra 5 degrees when it's already about October there. I don't think that there's a way that move forward with a reduced demand curve. I think if anything, it's going the other way. Zambia exporter, and I think geothermal has some potential. I've actually calculated some numbers what I think might be here. Or other East African countries, but it would make a significant impact in the energy mix if there is the government commitment and regulation. Because one thing that I can tell you is firsthand that is really challenging is to try and do geophysics when you've got lions, elephants around you. So it is a matter of commitment, but I think, as I see it, the Zambian government is committed. Of energy here is doing a lot to help both us and the future of geothermal, and I hope you all keep track of us here on African Rift. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I see the time has really beaten us, but I would just like to ask one final question, and this is a follow-up to what Mesret mentioned regarding harmonizing policies between the energy sector and other non-energy sectors. And this is something that we think can have a big impact with regard to the development of direct uses. So maybe Dr. Mender, what would you like to share regarding this?
Hello. I think, Jack, you are very clear on that, and Meseret indicated that there is a very important need for policies to be really harmonized. And in this case, we really need, for example, geothermal impacts even agriculture, impacts health, impacts energy. But for example, in Kenya, you don't have people from energy really talking with people from agriculture, and even people from tourism. And yet all these sectors are really, both are impacted by geothermal policies. And therefore, I think the governments and the policy leaders should really sit down and really harmonize those policies. That's where now geothermal can go to the next level. Because we know like tourism is
I think we lost you for a bit there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think as we come to the end, a final question for Mr. Emula. I just want to ask, as the GRMF is planning this process of evolving, and also to start integrating more direct uses. What are some of the things that you'd expect the countries to put in place to enable them be able to utilize these funds for direct use development?
Yeah, well, right now, of course, GRMF is only dedicated to power generation. This is just, let's say, also within the finance agreements between African Union Commission, KfW, and so on. But like Joseph already mentioned today in the morning in the keynote, we are looking, of course, at direct use because we are aware, above all, also coming, of course, from Europe, we know about the greenhouses and the possibilities to, like Dr. Meseret already mentioned, for food security and so on. So what we are doing right now is we are discussing already with KfW in this regard. And of course, this would be a certain extension, and such extensions also of running programs take some time. And there wasn't not yet made any decision in this regard, but I only can say right now, so we are discussing it. We made a questionnaire, we did also research, also of course with a very valuable input from the ARENA report and regarding the possibilities. And I think, yes, above all now getting, of course, to direct use, it's a different situation for financing here, because you have to value much more the off-taker of the heat, of course, if you think about the credit worthiness, also in the complete regard. So it will be a little bit tricky here. It's not about a long-term PPA, for example, with security revenues. So one thing, of course, could be mining authorities. Another thing, of course, will be larger agricultural associations, for example. But it's definitely worth to go for it. I think the potential is really great, and we just have to substitute fossil fuels in any case. And maybe one thing that we also definitely highlighted in our research is the direct social impact that we see, because a large power plant, well done, of course, contributes to the complete energy portfolio, but the smaller direct use really has an direct impact to the social life and well-being of the people nearby of this project. So these things also definitely were highlighted. We are still in discussion with the partner, above all KfW, in this regard. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I would like to thank all the panelists for your kind contribution. We've really gone over time, but we really appreciate that you've been able to stay with us for all this time. So at this moment, I would like to welcome the Head of Partnerships at ARENA, Mr. Amjad Abdullah, to make his closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Jake. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the very open and candid discussions during this event organized by ARENA, the African Union Commission, and the UNEP in the framework of the Global Geothermal Alliance. Indeed, it has been a great event where valuable experiences have been shared. The IRENA report, Geothermal Development in Eastern Africa, which provides recommendations for power and direct use, clearly demonstrates that the establishment of clear and consistent policies and regulatory framework is a key analyst for accelerating the deployment of geothermal energy. The impressive growth in geothermal electricity generation in Kenya is a direct result of deliberate government policies. In Ethiopia, we note that the entry of the private sector to develop green geothermal fields, driven by establishment of licensing procedures and power purchase agreements that addresses the concerns of investors. I thank the speakers from Kenya, Zambia for sharing their perspectives and experiences in this regard. I also urge the region to embrace geothermal to meet its growing energy needs sustainably. Creation of enabling policies and regulations is a first step in this direction. It would indeed be great to see energy plans from the region that features geothermal energy more prominently, given the excellent geothermal resources in the region. The speakers from Mexico have shared with their experiences in developing geothermal plants, and we hope to continue such exchanges to learn from each other. IRENA certainly remains committed to supporting countries in this regard. The Eastern African Rift region has recognized the critical value that direct use can play in uplifting the socio-economics of the society, in providing affordable energy for industries, supporting food security, and empowering the local community. I'm also pleased to learn that the geothermal risk mitigation facility can finance the development of direct use in addition to electricity projects. I also would like to thank UNAP and other partners in the region for their continuous efforts in supporting the country's realization of their geothermal potential, including direct use. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the African Union Commission and the UNAP for their support in organizing this important event. I would also like to extend my gratitude to all the speakers and panelists for your valuable contributions. Your contributions will certainly indeed go a long way in promoting the establishment of enabling environment for geothermal development in the region. And to you participants, your participation and constructive engagement is highly appreciated. I also wanted to thank my team, Michelle and Jeff, who has worked behind the scenes and contributed to the successful of this event. With that, I close and look forward to great contribution of geothermal energy in meeting the energy needs of the countries in the East African region. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdullah, for those closing remarks. And now I'll just